In the year 1900, a single American city shines brighter than almost any other on the entire continent. Galveston rises from a narrow sandbar in Texas, and its merchants call it the Wall Street of the Southwest. Its harbor is the busiest in the entire region, and its grand mansions gleam with the calm confidence of limitless fortune. And yet, within a single September afternoon, this golden city becomes the deadliest disaster in American history. How does the wealthiest port on the Gulf vanish almost completely in the span of a few violent hours? The answer begins, not with the storm itself, but with a fatal certainty that men hold in their own minds. For the official story tells of a hurricane that no one could possibly have foreseen or prevented in time. But the records of that season reveal something the textbooks have long preferred to keep in the shadows. A warning does arrive, clear and urgent, several days before the waters rise over the streets of Galveston. That warning travels north, from an island that knows tropical storms better than anyone else in the world. And the reason it is ignored has less to do with science than with pride, rivalry, and human arrogance. To understand how a city dies, we must first understand the dazzling world that believed it could not. In 1900, Galveston is a place of astonishing modernity, standing far ahead of most other cities across the young American nation. Electric lights glow along its avenues, while gas lamps still flicker in older corners of the country. Telephones connect its busy offices, and one of the first electric streetcar lines in Texas glides through the town. The port handles enormous shipments of cotton, the white gold that flows from southern fields to the sea. Tall sailing ships and steamers crowd the wharves, loading endless bales bound for the great mills of Europe and beyond. Banks, cotton exchanges, and grand opera houses line streets shaded by elegant Victorian architecture. Wealthy families build ornate mansions, their balconies and towers facing the warm waters of the Gulf. Nearly 40,000 people live here, drawn by commerce, opportunity, and the promise of a bright future. The city feels utterly invincible, a glittering jewel of the new century perched proudly at the very edge of the open ocean. But beneath this prosperity lies a quiet and dangerous truth that few residents care to think about. Galveston sits upon a low island, a fragile ribbon of sand lying barely a few feet above the restless waves at every high tide. The highest point in the entire city reaches less than 9 feet above the level of the surrounding sea. Some far-sighted engineers and citizens propose a protective seawall to guard the streets against the fury of the Gulf. The idea is studied, debated in council chambers, and then quietly dismissed as needless and expensive. For the prevailing belief holds that the gentle slope of the seabed will forever tame the force of any approaching storm. A respected official of the National Weather Service publishes his confident conclusions on the matter. He argues that the shallow coastal waters make a truly destructive hurricane in this favored region all but completely impossible. Such storms, he insists, belong to distant coasts, never to the safe and favored harbor of Galveston. And so the proud city grows ever taller and richer, trusting blindly in a promise that nature has never once agreed to keep. This is the world of Galveston in 1900, brilliant and proud, standing on sand and sure of its permanence. Then, in the final days of August, something dark and patient stirs within the warm and restless Caribbean Sea. A tropical disturbance gathers strength, spinning slowly westward beneath the heavy and humid tropical skies. By early September, the system sweeps across Cuba, drenching its towns and fields in relentless and blinding sheets of rain. In Havana, the meteorologists of the local observatory watch the storm with deep and practiced concern. For generations, Cuban forecasters have studied these tempests with a precision born of long and bitter experience. They read the clouds, the winds, and the falling pressure, and they reach a clear and alarming conclusion. This storm, they warn, is not weakening at all, and its path bends steadily and dangerously toward the Gulf of Mexico. They send their forecasts northward, urging caution to the Great Weather Authority in the United States. But in Washington, the National Weather Bureau regards the Cuban warnings with suspicion and disdain. Officials there believe their own models are superior, and they distrust the predictions from Havana. A bitter professional rivalry has grown between the two weather services, quietly poisoning cooperation between them. The Bureau even restricts the telegraph cables, limiting the alarming reports flowing from the island. And so the most experienced storm watchers in the entire hemisphere are silenced at the worst possible moment. Washington firmly concludes that the system will turn harmlessly northeast, away from the Texas coastline. This single fateful judgment, born of pride and faulty assumption, helps to seal the fate of an entire unsuspecting city. For the storm does not turn northeast as the confident forecasters in the capital so firmly expect. Instead, it slides into the wide-open Gulf, where warm summer waters feed its strength like fuel upon a rising fire. Day by day, hour by hour, the system grows broader, darker, and far more powerful than anyone realizes. It churns toward the Texas shore with a strange and quiet patience, gathering the strength of the entire warm sea. In Galveston, life continues as always, untroubled by the distant menace forming beyond the horizon. Children sit at their lessons, merchants tally their accounts, and laden ships unload their cargo along the busy docks. No siren sounds, no general alarm is raised, and the city sleeps beneath the false comfort of routine. The warning that could have saved thousands of lives lies buried beneath rivalry, arrogance, and deeply misplaced pride. And the sea, ancient and indifferent, begins to remember the low island that has forgotten to fear it. Friday, the 7th of September, dawns warm and heavy, and a strange, silent heaviness hangs in the motionless air. Out at the beach, the waves arrive far larger than usual, rolling in with a deep and unfamiliar rhythm. Long, powerful swells crash steadily against the shore, even though the sky above still remains mostly clear and blue. The local forecaster notices the steadily falling barometer and the rising surf with quiet private unease. He raises storm warning flags above the city, but the official bureau still issues no order to evacuate. Many curious residents gather along the shore, fascinated by the powerful waves rather than being frightened by them. Families stroll along the beach, watching the spectacle of the angry water as if it were entertainment. By the morning of Saturday, the 8th of September, the rising waters climb steadily into the low streets of the city. The Gulf and the bay swell together, and the narrow island starts to vanish beneath the rising flood. The wind speeds climb steadily through the morning, tearing at rooftops and snapping limbs from the old shade trees. The forecaster sends his final urgent telegram warning that the situation has grown truly desperate. Then the telegraph lines fall, and Galveston is cut off completely from the rest of the watching world. By afternoon, the full force of the hurricane descends upon the island, with terrifying and total fury. The winds reach speeds estimated near 140 miles per hour across the exposed coast. But the gravest danger is not the wind. It is the great wall of water the storm pushes ahead of itself. A storm surge more than 15 feet high rolls across an island whose highest ground is barely 9. In only a matter of hours, the entire city all but disappears beneath the churning and merciless waters of the open Gulf. The wooden houses nearest the beach are the first to give way before the relentless pressure of the sea. As they collapse, one by one, their shattered timbers lock together into a vast and grinding raft of heavy and unstoppable debris. This moving wall of wreckage is driven inland by the surge, crushing structure after structure in its path. Even brick mansions and solid public buildings, thought to be safe, crumble beneath the advancing wall of destruction. Families climb to upper floors and then to rooftops, seeking any refuge above the still rising waters. In the deepening darkness, the wind screams and the water roars, and the boundary between sea and city dissolves entirely. At the orphanage, run by the Sisters of St. Mary, the nuns face an impossible and heartbreaking choice. To keep the children together, they bind them to themselves with lengths of clothesline in the storm. Their courage is absolute, though the surging waters prove far stronger than any human hope that night. Across the drowning island, countless ordinary people perform quiet and selfless acts of bravery during the disaster. Strangers pull strangers from the flood, and many give their last strength trying to save their neighbors. By the gray morning of the 9th of September, the storm moves on, leaving a scene of devastation almost beyond belief. Where a thriving modern city once stood, there now stretches a flattened wasteland of mud and broken ruin. Whole neighborhoods have simply ceased to exist, swept utterly clean away as though they had never been built at all. Survivors emerge into the gray light, dazed and silent, struggling to comprehend the scale of the loss. Between 6,000 and 8,000 people lose their lives on that single terrible afternoon and night. It remains, to this very day, the deadliest natural disaster ever recorded in United States history. Roughly half of the entire city is gone, and nearly a third of all its buildings are utterly destroyed. The exhausted survivors face a shattered island with no clean water, no power, and no contact with the distant mainland. Bridges to the coast have collapsed, and the wreckage blocks nearly every street and avenue in the city. In the lingering heat of the Texas September, a new and urgent danger rises above even the grief of the stunned survivors. To prevent deadly outbreaks of typhoid and cholera, the city must act with grim and unimaginable resolve. With no time and no means for proper burial, immense and solemn funeral pyres are lit across the ruined island. For weeks, these solemn fires burn day and night, a final and sorrowful tribute to the many who are lost. It is a decision made not from cruelty, but purely from desperation, to protect the living from the spread of disease. News of the catastrophe spreads slowly outward, carried by the few who manage to escape across the bay. When the full and terrible scale of the tragedy reaches the nation, an outpouring of sympathy and aid begins at once. The American Red Cross arrives, led personally by its founder, the legendary and tireless Clara Barton. Though now elderly and frail, she tirelessly organizes hospitals, distributes supplies, and brings order to the chaos. Tents rise among the ruins, food is shared, and the wounded receive care under the most difficult conditions. Donations pour in generously from across the entire country and beyond, a testament to compassion in the face of horror. Slowly, painfully, the survivors begin the long and uncertain work of clearing the debris from their lives. They now face a fundamental question that will determine the entire future of their broken island home. Should they abandon Galveston forever, surrendering the sandbar back to the sea that has claimed it? Or should they stay and somehow find a way to defy the very ocean that has so nearly erased them all? For many ordinary cities, such a devastating blow would mark the end, a final chapter written in mud and in salt water. But the people of Galveston make a choice that will astonish engineers around the world for decades. They decide not merely to rebuild their fallen city, but to physically remake the very island that lies beneath their own feet. What follows is one of the most audacious feats of civil engineering attempted anywhere in that era. If nature has proven the island far too low and too exposed, then the island itself, they reason, must be changed. The survivors resolve to raise a barrier against the sea and to lift their entire city toward the sky. It is a vision so impossibly bold it borders on madness, born of grief, defiance, and unbreakable determination. And against every expectation, this ruined community on a sandbar will turn that vision into solid reality. The story of Galveston, it turns out, is not only one of destruction, but also one of remarkable rebirth. From the ashes of the nation's greatest catastrophe rises a monument to human stubbornness and to iron will. The first of the great projects is the seawall, a massive curving concrete barrier built to face the open Gulf of Mexico. Construction begins in 1902, designed to stand more than 15 feet high along the vulnerable shore. Its outer face curves outward, shaped deliberately to catch incoming waves and hurl their force upward. Engineers anchor it deep into the ground, supporting it with pilings and a wide apron of heavy stone. Mile by patient mile, the Great Wall grows along the beachfront, a gray rampart standing silent guard against the sea. But the seawall alone cannot save a city whose streets still lie barely above the level of the high tide. And so the survivors undertake the second and even more astonishing phase of their truly incredible plan. They resolve to raise the entire elevation of the city, lifting the very ground on which the streets stand. More than 2,000 buildings, including homes, churches, and even one vast cathedral, must somehow be lifted aloft. Workers place enormous jack screws beneath each structure, turning them slowly and carefully by hand. Inch by inch, entire buildings rise into the air on temporary supports, suspended above their old foundations. Some structures are raised several feet, balanced delicately while life inside them continues almost as normal. Residents climb temporary walkways to reach their elevated homes while the work proceeds beneath them. Then the engineers pump millions of cubic yards of wet sand and slurry up from the seabed into the open space below. Dredges work the channel day and night, drawing up the sediment that will become the new foundation. The wet fill flows beneath the lifted buildings, settling and drying into solid and elevated new ground. Street by street and block by block, the entire level of the city is gradually and permanently raised toward the sky. The grade slopes gently down from the towering seawall, guiding any future floodwater back toward the bay. This monumental labor stretches across many years, demanding patience, precision, and relentless effort. By around the year 1910, the heart of the grade-raising project is largely complete across the rebuilt city. Galveston now stands higher, stronger, and far better defended than it ever was before the Great Storm. The combination of seawall and raised grade transforms a fragile sandbar into a fortified urban island. The full success of this engineering becomes clear when later hurricanes strike the rebuilt city in the years that lie ahead. Storms that would once have brought total ruin are now turned back, their surges broken upon the wall. Lives are saved and property is spared, vindicating the enormous sacrifice and expense of the project. Engineers from distant nations travel to Galveston to study the methods used in this remarkable effort. The lifting of an entire city becomes a celebrated case study in the young science of disaster resilience. Yet even as Galveston rebuilds itself into a fortress, the wider tides of history begin to shift against it. For while the city heals its wounds, the sources of its former wealth quietly move toward other shores. The disaster has shaken the confidence of investors who once poured their fortunes into the island port. Capital, like water, seeks the safest channel, and many financiers now look northward for their security. And there, on the safer mainland, a rival city already stands ready to seize the future Galveston has lost. 50 miles inland, the city of Houston watches the fate of its coastal neighbor with keen ambition. Sheltered from the open Gulf, Houston offers investors a harbor far removed from the reach of the storm. In the early years of the new century, a vast and astonishing deposit of oil is discovered in the fields of East Texas. This black gold ignites an economic boom that will reshape the entire region for generations to come. Houston positions itself at the very center of this booming new industry, attracting refineries, banks, and railroads. To rival the coast, the inland city dredges a deep ship channel connecting it directly to the open sea. Great vessels can now reach Houston safely, bypassing the exposed and storm-haunted wharves of Galveston. The flow of cotton, oil, and commerce shifts steadily away from the island and toward the sheltered rival. Year after year, the balance of economic power tilts ever more decisively in favor of the sheltered mainland metropolis. Galveston, once the proud Wall Street of the Southwest, slowly fades into the shadow of its neighbor. The grand old mansions still remain, but the great fortunes that once built them migrate quietly to other addresses. The once busiest port in the region becomes a quieter harbor, its golden age preserved only in memory. Houston, meanwhile, swells into one of the largest and most powerful cities in the entire young nation. The storm did not only destroy buildings, it redirected the very course of an entire region's destiny. This is the hidden legacy of 1900, a single afternoon that rewrote the economic map of the Gulf Coast. Yet Galveston's greatest gift to the world is not its wealth, but the hard lesson written in its loss. In the long wake of the disaster, the National Weather Bureau is at last forced to confront its own fatal failures. The arrogance that once dismissed the Cuban warnings gives way slowly to humility and to genuine reform. Forecasting methods improve, cooperation expands, and the tracking of tropical storms grows ever sharper. The very hurricane that should have been foreseen becomes the lasting reason that future storms are now watched closely. Out of thousands of lives lost comes a system designed to ensure such fatal silence never happens again. And so the nation's most lethal natural catastrophe also becomes one of its most important turning points. One arrogant certainty, one ignored warning. One low island standing proudly against the vast open sea. A storm forms, a warning falls silent, the waters rise, and a golden city vanishes in a single night. Then, from the ruins, the survivors answer the ocean not with surrender, but with concrete and with sand. They lift a city toward the sky and build a wall against the sea, refusing to abandon their broken home. In doing so, they turn the nation's worst catastrophe into a lasting and enduring monument of human resilience. The official story long claimed the Great Storm was an unforeseeable act beyond all human prevention. But the truth is that the warning came carried north from Havana by the finest forecasters of the age. It was pride and rivalry, not mere ignorance, that silenced the alarm and left a proud city in the dark. That single failure cost between 6,000 and 8,000 lives in the span of one afternoon. Half of Galveston was erased, yet from that loss came the seawall, the raised city, and a wiser nation. The economic crown passed to Houston, but the lesson of humility before nature passed to the whole world. Galveston rebuilt itself higher and stronger, proving that even the deepest ruin can give rise to renewal. And the storm that destroyed a city ultimately helped build the warning systems that protect millions today. Today, as warming oceans feed storms of ever greater power, the lesson of Galveston feels strikingly modern. Once again, coastal cities rise low against the sea, trusting in walls and in their own confident defenses. And once again, the question returns of whether we will heed the warnings or repeat the old human arrogance. The waters are rising once more, and history quietly asks if we have truly learned what Galveston paid to teach. Explore with us how other moments of disaster reshaped our world and discover the lessons hidden within them.